In today's episode, I'm talking with Mary McMonagle. Welcome to the show.
Thank you, Jill. I'm so honored to be here.
Tell me about what you do professionally.
I am a Reiki master and life coach. I specifically work with women who want to heal parts of themselves so they can attract their soulmate. When we are seeking love and getting ready to put ourselves out there, it comes down to healing beliefs we have created over the years around our confidence, around our self-love, around trusting ourselves.
That's in some ways similar to the work that I do around a different topic, this idea that our beliefs that are so ingrained in us from childhood, they were put there by our parents, by the society around us, whether it's our schools, our religions, and where we grow up, they stay with us. And it really affects the way that we move through life. With my work with people around the end of life, it's similar in that we need to shift what we believe in order to meet the experiences that we're going to have. All of us are going to have them, whether we want to or not. Either we're going to die before everybody that we love, or we're going to have to witness the people that we love dying. Did you have any experiences when you were younger watching somebody that you love die?
When I was younger, the first death I can recall was my grandmom. We called her Mum because it was my Italian side. That was really eye-opening. She had Alzheimer's. I remember being around her when she was towards the end of her life. One specific moment, it was my birthday, and she kept saying, "Oh, whose birthday are we celebrating?" And I'm about probably in 5th grade at the time. And I said, "It's my birthday. We're celebrating." She would say, "Oh, well, did we sing?" And I said, "Yeah, we already sang." She would say, "Well, it didn't sound like singing." And I just started laughing. And she kept repeating that over and over again. That really stuck with me as a kid, to see her go through that end of life process. And my papa, he was heartbroken. From an early age, I was exposed to it all, and being such an empath, now I look back and I realize how much I was feeling everything that was going on as well.
When we're children, we're even more in tune with it than we are when we're adults. Because I know when I was a kid, I lived with my grandmother and my grandfather while my grandfather was dying. And I was 4 when he died. I don't remember it well, but I still have memories of him. And in my memories, he wasn't sick. It was my grandpa. And then my mother and my grandmother had told me when I was older that he had lung cancer that spread to his brain. And so eventually he couldn't speak very clearly. And I was the only person that could understand him. So he would talk to me, and then I would tell my grandmother what he wanted and needed. We were connecting somehow on a level that was not language, where I was able to understand what he needed. But as we get older, for whatever reason, I don't know if it's just the distance between whatever it is before we're born to me as a 44-year-old woman, 40 years difference between that time space is a little bit potentially what makes that difference. Children really do have an interesting connection with death and dying and being able to feel it in a different way. When your grandmother died, were you able to go to the funeral? Were you able to be part of all of that kind of ritual and ceremony around death and dying?
We had a viewing, we had a funeral, and then the ceremony after where everybody gets lunch. I remember it hitting me hard and seeing her dead body, because it was open casket. When you were sharing and talking about us as kids and having different, maybe more open beliefs, I think from an early age that actually made me fear dying. I used to remember being up at night as a kid and being afraid of death, being afraid of dying. It was something that seemed really scary when I was younger.
To get over that fear of death and dying you had when you were a child?
Getting over that fear comes through when you go through a spiritual awakening or develop a connection to yourself, God, the universe, whatever you believe in. You start to understand that this fear is just the fear of the unknown. Certain people have certain beliefs. For me, what I know to be true now is dying is a feeling. When your soul's leaving this body, you are tapping into a certain frequency and a certain feeling that your soul is ready to receive. So in a way, it's really been a beautiful process for me to realize, okay, this is just allowing your soul to move on to the next level. In our human form, I believe we're always dying and being reborn. In the last 6 months, I am a completely different person. And parts of myself had to die. Parts of the beliefs we've been talking about, I had to let those parts die so I could birth more of my power, love, and confidence. It's been a cool process to reshape how, from a kid, this fear into my understandings and beliefs now.
You're right about the deaths that we go through throughout our entire life. And a lot of times we don't actually honor the deaths the way that we should, whether it's the end of a relationship or the end of a career. When I became a mother, that was a huge ending and a rebirth into a whole new version of myself. I didn't necessarily honor it the way that I could have or should have because we're just not taught to. And I struggled. I had a hard time in some of that shift and some of the letting go of the freedom and other things I used to have before I had children. If we could honor those deaths, if we could grieve them the way we would grieve any death, and then allow ourselves to let go, and we could fully step into these new roles. But we're just not taught to do that. A lot of people look at it as if it's a spouse or a child, maybe a parent, you're allowed to grieve this long. But anything outside of that, we put these expectations on people of why are you not over it already?
Yeah.
And God forbid someone says they're grieving a dog. Eye rolls that you'll see from that. But it's important for us to grieve our losses if we want to be able to move forward as whole spirits and whole human beings. We need to grieve.
I love that because grieving doesn't have to mean a bad thing. It means you're healing. And I love what you shared because that's so important, the grieving process and expressing those emotions. I know a lot of people in today's society, if you cry in front of them, oh my gosh, don't get sad. Like, why are you crying? What's wrong? Where I look at someone crying who's I know is working through something and I say, hell yes, cry, let it go, let it out. Like you said, we need to let go of some of these feelings because if you're trying to call in more happiness, more love, and more joy, but you haven't created space within yourself, then you're not going to be able to, and it's going to be very confusing, but definitely is a challenging process. That's not to emotionally bypass. You'll see the real strength in when you're able to say, I'm allowed to grieve. I'm allowed to feel sad. I don't say, I am feeling sad. I am sad. I say, I am experiencing sadness. So if you're grieving right now, if you're listening to this or you've experienced a grieving process, it is an experience. So you're allowed to experience sadness. That's a beautiful thing. So I love that you shared that.
Feeling our feelings is so important no matter what the feelings are. And when someone sees you crying and they try to stop it, it's because it makes them feel uncomfortable. Rather than dealing with their own feelings of discomfort, they want to shut it down. I try to not judge people for just doing what we've been taught to do. But there's a lot of stuff that I was just taught to do that I'm unlearning so that I can be a better human for the people around me. And if you're the type of person that does that to somebody, I'm really not giving you any type of shame or judgment around it. Maybe just question next time you see somebody, especially even a child. How often do we see children crying and it'll be like, oh, don't cry. Or even worse, when they're like, man up to a little kid that's crying.
Yes.
But maybe just question why you feel the need to get somebody to stop crying. Ideally, I would like to get to the point where I'm more like you, where I can encourage it because part of me still wants to comfort and fix, not shut it down necessarily, but it's because I am not a big crier. And I'm not a big crier because I made myself not cry when I was a teenager because I had a boyfriend that was like, you cry all the time. And so I was like, you know what? You're right. I'm not going to cry at all. And then I didn't for a long time. And that was not healthy, but it was a way to protect myself from the shame and the judgment I was feeling. And so I shut down the crying for a really long time. It does still make me a little uncomfortable when I see people cry, because it makes something in me kind of move around. And I just need to sit with it and I need to embrace it. And I need to allow myself to feel all the feelings, including discomfort, because that's how we can heal ourselves. And essentially when we heal ourselves, that's how we heal the world around us.
I love you being so authentic and owning that and saying part of me still is a little bit uncomfortable of that. But everyone listening, like, look how powerful Jill's awareness is because you're able to say, well, it also stems from this past event. And that's everything right there. That's how you begin to heal and work through this, which is so beautiful to hear you recognize that. And you said something that a lot of society does when we do see a person crying. You mentioned if you feel the need to fix it, which is so beautiful. The best way you can be there for someone is realizing that when they're crying and they're grieving, they're in their authentic expression because crying is a vulnerable space and vulnerability is beautiful. I look at crying as a vulnerable space and I say vulnerable as a beautiful way of authentic expression. By trying to shut it down or wanting to jump into action mode and fix it, it's really preventing the person from healing on a way where they're expressing themselves. Another big thing that I've learned throughout my journey is you're not broken. I'm not broken. You're not broken. If someone is crying, it doesn't mean that they're broken. They may feel that at the moment, but a part of themselves is shedding that layer, being able to let go when we want to jump into fix it mode. And I've definitely have been there myself. And I still find myself like, okay, let this person be in their authentic expression. Because sometimes it's like sitting in silence if you're with someone and you feel like you need to talk because the silence is getting uncomfortable. Just allowing that person to be in and experience their selves in a new light that maybe they've never experienced before.
The most healing thing you can do for somebody is just sitting there and holding that space for them. I've had death doula clients that I've had to practice because part of me wants to fix and it feels like I need to say something or do something. So I've had to practice learning to just sit and be aware and listen. There's conversations that I'll have with somebody going through this illness that I have is not treatable. I am dying. There's nothing they could do. I'm trying to process all of this while also feeling terrible because the disease is making them feel really sick. I just sit and I listen and I'll occasionally say something to keep the conversation flowing. And then afterwards, they'll be like, you are so wise. I didn't say anything that was profound or even interesting, but giving them the space to say what they need to say and not judging it and not trying to shut something down when they're afraid. I feel like I'm giving up when I just sit there and understand that fear and letting them continue to go down it, not saying just keep fighting or whatever the things are people say. Then people have this healing experience because they had the healing themselves, because they were able to process the thoughts and get out the words that they needed to hear themselves without some shutting it down and trying to influence what they're saying. But it is hard. It's hard to just sit there and be like, yep, I'm going to sit here and keep my mouth shut and just listen to what they're saying. But then you can learn a lot too when you do that. You can really experience this process with somebody and learn from them in ways that you can't learn yourself because you're not having their experience.
Yes.
And I love that. It feels like an honor for me to witness somebody in that space because it's such a profound time in a human life when we're facing the end of life.
It is. It's a beautiful space. And I love what you said because there's something so powerful in that. If you're listening to this and you're grieving and maybe you feel stuck in your life, right? Maybe there's a lot going on in your life. You're listening to this podcast for a reason. Part of it is that we can hear advice, help from our best friends, from people that we love and we trust. But until we have the internal connection within ourselves, meaning a light switch turns on within ourselves, it won't make sense until that light switch turns on. Jill can sit there and tell her clients that you're loved, don't worry, it's going to be okay. But until internally they turn it on and believe that they are loved and everything's going to be okay, it's not going to make sense. And that's such an important part when you are grieving, that it's so important to tune in with yourself and inward. So I love that you mentioned that because that is a huge part in healing.
Hard to know that somebody could benefit from what you want to say to them, but they're not able to hear it yet.
Yes.
Because when you want to help people, when you're that type of person, you need to get to that point where you say, I will be here when they're ready, if they're ever ready, but this might not be when they're ready. And that's okay. We have to let go of this idea that everybody is going to be able to hear what they need to hear at the time. It's interesting now with me working with people at the end of life. If I'm working with somebody and I'm trying to work with their fears around their own death, and I can see that they're struggling and they're resisting and stuck in this pain and suffering and fear and anxiety, they might die that way. I might not be able to help them get to that place where they're able to feel the calm and peace and acceptance that I'm hoping they'll feel. But again, maybe at that moment of death, they actually do it.
Yeah.
Maybe it doesn't seem like it leading up. And then eventually they're basically nonverbal right before they're dying. But maybe at that moment of death, it actually clicks and they die in peace. I don't know. I can hope for that. And that's where, for me, the Reiki and the energy work really comes in. I was sitting with somebody the other day that was actually dying, and I won't give Reiki to somebody without their permission. What I did, because I couldn't get his permission, I tried to think of it as in, I'm sending you calm and peace. Not necessarily Reiki, but knowing that I was sending that out so that he can just feel, if nothing else, my presence calm and peaceful versus the craziness that sometimes happens when you're in the hospital. I just sat and I was like, all right, we're going to hang out here together for a little bit. And I meditated and I was like, I'm sending you calm and peace. Maybe it helped, maybe it didn't. I like to think that it did, but I'll never know. And that's okay, because I want to give that to people, even if I don't know for sure if it helps them or not.
Part of that too is trusting that the person is always receiving what's meant for them. This conversation is so divinely timed because I'm currently navigating this process with my dad. My dad was on hospice, and in the end stages of his life, I've sent healing and love to when he has that transition process. I know he won't accept the Reiki healing while he's here on earth, but I've sent it to that transition phase where his soul is activating his body. We don't really know what that phase is like, but it brings peace and understanding to me, knowing I did my part to help my dad, but also showing and letting him know, Dad, it's okay, I'm here with you.
How's that experience overall been for you, navigating the end of life with your father?
It's been way more challenging than I realized. I live down at the Jersey Shore. My dad's closer to the Philadelphia area, and I go back every other week. I'll spend a week there, and it has been very challenging more because being such an empath and sensitive to energy, I'm feeling everything he's feeling, and then people are coming in and out of the hot house constantly, whether it's nurses, whether it's visitors, and then I have 3 other siblings, so trying to be in communication with them. So it is a very challenging process. I believe I'm a very strong person and I can handle a lot, but it's been challenging navigating that, navigating myself, navigating my business, navigating my clients. But overall, I'm proud of myself, and I'll share this tip because maybe it'll help you if you're listening. I'm proud of myself because I've had to communicate. I've had to ask for help when I feel like I'm overwhelmed. I've been able to communicate with my clients. All my clients know everything that's going on and are completely understanding. So if I need to reschedule a session, they're already well informed. Same thing with my clients is I tell them, if I'm not in the energy to serve you, I'm going to cancel the session because I want to be in the highest energy. So really just what's been helping me navigate has been getting crystal clear on my communication and saying, hey, I don't have it all together. Even though I'm a life coach, Reiki healer, I don't have it all together, nor do I want to have it all together because that's not realistic. So it's just been a very humbling process. Even though it's been very challenging, it's been very humbling to see that all this work that I've been doing on myself is finally able to come together and piece together in my life. But then it's also been very humbling where I'm able to ask for help and just fully surrender with everything with my dad. I fully trust that he's going to be so much more at peace once his soul transitions and once he dies.
Within yourself, was there any feelings that there was loose ends with your father that you needed to maybe work through while you're facing the fact that your father will not be here soon? I'm just curious if there was any feelings of, I need to still have this conversation or I need to work these things out, like how you're navigating that part of it.
Yeah, that's a really great question. There definitely has been these feelings of, okay, I need to have certain conversations because my My dad and I have had such a rocky road. Even the last few months leading up to when he got really sick, we were not talking. Our relationship got really bad. When I had come back and was staying with him, I was harboring a lot of resentment because my family, especially my dad, does not understand what I do. It's beyond their conscious level, which I'm aware of, but it does create this block. And I feel that. And as a daughter, all you want to do is be loved by your father and your parents. There has definitely been a lot of factors in our relationship that has caused a lot of resentment. When I came back, I was taking a lot of focus off myself. I was taking a lot of focus off my business and putting all my focus on my dad. So that was bringing up a lot of resentment. One of my friends helped me recognize, well, Mary, if you're having this resentment between you and your dad, it does impact all areas. That's something I share a lot because it's energy. So you're feeling resentment towards your dad, but it does also going to impact you and your business. Internally, I was working through that. And then as far as conversations, I'm still getting there. I feel like there's still a conversation I want to have with him because this keeps coming up. People actually asking me a similar question. Do you feel at peace with it? What's going on? I have gotten better at communicating to my dad saying, I love you. You were a good dad, because I do believe that. I have gotten to a part of my journey where some of the things that my dad, my family has said and done to me, I've gotten to a part of my journey where I can understand that they don't want and they never will. I've gone to a place of that, which has brought me so much acceptance. So I will tell my dad, listen, I love you. You were a good dad, because I'm also able to recognize the moments where he was a good dad and did amazing things for me. But again, those moments where my dad wasn't able to show up for me how I would have wanted to can be challenging to navigate. I definitely feel like something is still lingering, and I'm trying to just be in the moment too, not feeling like I have to force something. I have to say something before he dies, because what if I don't? I have the belief that once he passes, our relationship is going to improve. I'm going to be able to communicate with my dad on a soul level. I'm going to be able to really feel his energy even more. Maybe I haven't said just yet, but I'm also okay and at peace with that. And my motto through all of this has been one day at a time, one breath at a time. And all of this messiness and emotions, it's made me more present. It's made me really be in the present moment, where I am a planner, where I'm like, I need to have this conversation and say it this way, where now I'm just dropped in the present. There's an opportunity where I feel like I can say, hey, Dad, I really do love you and I appreciate you. And then navigate it like a ship from there. If I see that's opening him up a little bit, or if I'm starting to navigate the conversation around death, that's scaring him a little bit, then I can just adjust from there.
There's a lot of beauty in that, because our relationships, especially with our parents, can just be so complicated. They oftentimes mean well, but especially older generations, they really just do the rinse repeat cycle of, this is what I was taught. These are the things I'm supposed to say. These are the judgments that I'm going to pass on. Again, I think they mean well because they think they're protecting us. When they see us being too weird, they see that potentially pushes us out of the tribe. It's that ingrained human instinct of, I need to be part of the tribe in order to survive. And if you see your child doing things where you're like, oh man, they're going to get picked on, they're going to get pushed out, they're going to be alone, they get scared and end up saying things that are really crappy. And I'm like, this is not helpful. This is not going to help me. It's just making me feel bad. And even though I don't like to think that I ever allow other people's opinions about my weirdness and the weird things that I do affect me, especially when it comes from my parents or the people I am closest to.
Yes.
They do it meaning to protect us, but in the long run, it doesn't work. It just makes us feel icky. Yeah, I don't like that. I'm trying really hard not to do it to my children, but I know that there's times when I am still just saying what I'm supposed to say, saying what I heard, and trying to protect my children. It comes across in a judgmental way.
Yes.
And I don't mean for it to. And I'm also not trying to push my trauma onto the kids of like, well, I was really bullied and picked on in 6th grade, and now my son's in 6th grade. So I'm like, maybe you don't want to, okay, fine. Do whatever you want. Just do it. It'll be fine. I think as a parent now, because I've done so much healing work on myself, which most of our parents haven't. They didn't have the access to what we have access to now. Most of the people that I interact with now, they're not local to me. I have coaches and people that I work with over the last couple of years that are literally all over the world. Part of it is that I have opportunity to access the people that have what I need that our parents just didn't have access to. So there's just so much with that dynamic that I find really challenging and really interesting. And I think it can be a beautiful time for us to connect with our parents on a different level, because in some ways now they're the ones that need the care. We're like swapping roles. They used to take care of us and now we have to take care of them. It can bring up so much resentment and anger and frustration, but it's oftentimes tied to not the experience itself. Even though for you, it feels like it was frustrating because it's taking me away from my business and it's taking me away from my clients. It's really more that it's bringing up the frustrations from earlier stuff. Yeah. It's easier to project it onto, well, it's taking me away from these things rather than being like, no, it's because he said really shitty things to me. And now I feel like I have to take care of him and I maybe don't want to. I find this often with siblings when they start nitpicking at each other. It's not really that they think you're not taking care of mom the right way. It's more that they're still mad that mom gave you a bike when they wanted the bike and they didn't get the bike. And they're just still mad about that. And so now it's all coming to the surface at this point when we're all very vulnerable, because death is very vulnerable. It's raw, it's real, it's vulnerable, which is partially why I love it so much. But it really will bring up all the stuff we've tried a long time to shove down and ignore and pretend wasn't there.
Whether you're listening to this and maybe you meditate or don't meditate, doing some form of daily self-development, spirituality work is a must. It doesn't mean you have to go meditate for an hour. It means go meditate for 2 minutes, set a timer, or say affirmations to yourself in the mirror for 30 seconds. Every time you're washing your hands, say I love you to yourself in the mirror. When Jill and I talk about healing work and being spiritual and in tune with yourself, that's how you get tough times, because you are connected to who you are. You are so connected to your emotions already. So when they come up, it's not a crazy experience to feel sadness. It's actually like, oh, wow, I'm experiencing sadness, so I can let go. I know on the opposite end of that, I will receive more joy once I experience the sadness. So if you're listening to this and you don't have any form of self-care practice, spiritual practice, self-development practice, create it now, because I see with my siblings specifically and family members who are not had any kind of self-development practice at all. It's like investing in yourself. If you want to be healthy and eat healthy every single day, you're going to feel good and have more energy in the long run. So it's a long run game. With death is being able to balance and being in tune with your emotions.
I've heard people sometimes call it spiritual hygiene. It's just like brushing your teeth and washing your hair. It's like the things that we need to do on a regular basis. You don't just do it once and say, okay, all done. It needs to be done on a regular basis. And when I first started my meditation, I think I was doing 5 minutes in the morning before I went to. Now I'm up to 20 minutes a day. And if I don't do it, it doesn't affect me a lot if it's just 1 or 2 days. But if I miss 3 or 4 days, like last week when I was sick, I didn't get up in the morning and meditate because I needed the rest. But it does affect my mental state if I miss it for a few days. It's just like if I didn't brush my teeth for a few days, after a while, my breath would really stink. We could definitely do another podcast sometime and talk more about the dynamics between siblings when people are facing the end of life. And this is where it's really important to remember to reach out for help when people need it, whether it's death doulas or whether it's someone that just does a different healing modality. We need other humans to help us through our life experiences. That includes birth, that includes death, that includes everything in between. Don't be afraid to ask for the help. Oftentimes we feel shame around asking for help, but it's important that we have the help that we need.
One of the things I tell people is you can absolutely do it on your own. If you are healing, it's like if you were in a rowboat and you were rowing to an island, but then a nice cruise ship comes passing by And the captain of the cruise ship says, hey, you want to hop on this cruise ship? There's other people, so you're going to feel less alone. I'm going to get you there, and we're going to get there a lot faster and safer. That's the example that I provide of what it's like to work with people like Jill and myself. Is you're going to feel safe, supported, and you're going to get there faster and feel better. You can absolutely heal on your own and get to that island. But why do it alone when all you have to do is ask for help and believe that you are worthy to receive the help?
That's a huge point. We oftentimes don't believe that we're worthy of healing or having the help and the support. We think we need to do it all alone. We think that makes us stronger, I guess. I feel like society kind of teaches us that if we ask for help, that's viewed as weak, where I think that's something we really need to let it go. We're working on it, right? All of us together that are doing this healing work, we're working on letting go of those old beliefs that essentially just harm us and the communities around us. I look at my kids and I'm hopeful that their generation is going to be different. I mean, they're going to be different, good and bad, I'm sure. There's going to be some parts of it that are worse, but I think some of it is going to be better. There's a lot of people that are parenting a little bit differently, and they have even more access to things than we ever did. Hopefully, I'll live a long life and I'll get to see my children age and do all these really cool things. But there's no guarantees, and that's okay.
I'm not married or have kids, but either way, if I'm blessed to be able to be with someone and be married, I'll still come back and haunt them, let them know I'm on them.
Oh, I'm coming back to visit my kids. My daughter, she's 9, and she'll say she doesn't want me to die before her. And I'm like, please, baby, I hope that I die before you, but I'll come back and visit, I promise. Is there anything you want to leave the listeners with?
I have my Upgrade Your Energy course. It's a freebie worth $88 value, way more now because I've added a lot to it. There's meditations, there's actually a yoga class, there's EFT tapping, which helps process emotions, and some master classes that I've done as well. Thank you for having me. This is a beautiful conversation.
Thanks for coming back on, Mary. I really appreciate this. I know this could be a little bit sensitive for you because it has not been that long since your father passed away. The first time we talked, which is at the beginning of this recording, you were going through the process of your father navigating the end of life on hospice. Anything you would like to share about that experience, your grieving process, whatever you think might be helpful for the listeners?
Yeah, of course. And thank you so much, Jill, because I think what I share here will be really helpful for people who are grieving and who maybe can resonate with my story. It hasn't been long at all. Looking at the calendar now from when we're recording this, in 2 days, it'll be a month since my dad's soul has left his body and him being officially at peace. The grieving process there is no, when people say like you can't prepare for what to expect, that is so true because you really don't know how you're going to feel or be until it comes. And for me personally, I've been saying that the grief has been like waves. And I'm a surfer. I use this analogy for a lot of things, but especially like grief. So you might be listening to this, going about your day, trying to do what's normal in life. And then all of a sudden you start to feel the grief, you start to feel the sadness, maybe you start to feel the anger, maybe you start to feel the confusion. As a surfer, we see waves starting to come and prepare to get in a position to paddle for the wave, to ride it. How this can relate for you is when you feel those emotions coming on, it's important to put yourself in a position where you're able to work through it. So you might be at work and feel like you need to cry. Go to the bathroom, talk to your boss, say, hey, this is what I'm experiencing right now. I'm okay. I just would like a moment, 5, 10, 20 minutes to go outside and shake it off or take some breaths. And that's an important step I've learned in the grieving process, is to communicate your needs, to communicate what's coming up for you. And so then the wave comes, you're in that position, you're working through the emotions, and then you're riding the wave. when you're riding the wave, how this relates for you is really just allowing yourself to experience it, experience what's coming up. Sometimes when I'm riding a wave, I'm like, this is a really big wave. I might get knocked off. Or my experience might be like, holy shit, this is fucking awesome. I'm riding this wave. And that's what it is like to experience emotions when you're grieving. And so for me, it's been the process of seeing when that wave comes and not running from it. You can't turn back, right? And so same thing when you're trying to heal from a death, we can't go back as much as we would love to. And so that's kind of how I've been processing right now.
That's a beautiful analogy about the wave. One of the things I've done with clients around grief is a self-regulation plan, meaning we don't know when grief is going to be triggered. So what
Yes.
we can do is have a plan ahead of time for how we can respond to it so that we are able to not hold it all inside and just be like, I can't do this right now. Having different techniques. And so I like how you said, go to the bathroom, take some time alone, walking. One of the things that I really like is shaking my hands a little bit when I feel like I need to just get it out. Holding it in is not good for you in the long run. You can't do it for any length of time. It's going to come out eventually. But knowing that you have these techniques in your pocket when you need them, then you're better able to face it and not feel like you're going to get caught up and tossed around in this wave. You're going to be like, no, I can handle whatever is coming. And I'm glad that you have these tools and techniques to navigate the process, because you're right. We don't know how we're going to feel when somebody dies. We can prepare as much as we want to, but we don't know the reality of what we're going to feel and how we're going to work through it day by day, because every day is going to be different. And having techniques really helps.
Yes, that's such a great thing that the action plan, that's so great that you do that with your clients, because I've been in the self-development world, the spirituality world, really since I was 16. So I have been preparing for these moments my whole life. If you're new to this and you don't have a meditation practice, you don't have a self-love practice, self-care practice, then what Jill said of having that action plan is going to be everything. For me, it's second nature, but it still makes it challenging. There's this part of myself that doesn't feel understood. Only when people who have gone through something similar helps heal. And I know you run a lot of meetup groups with people, which is so beautiful, because I found that when I connect with someone who has gone through a similar experience, lost a parent or lost a loved one so close, it's finally like, I can breathe. They understand me. They understand at least what I'm going through. Until this point, I have friends and people I love who have gone through what I'm going through now. I have all the empathy and love and compassion to give. But when you go through this deep transformation and deep transition in your life, it is valuable having those people who can somewhat understand what you're going through, because it is different from everyone else. So that's something I feel called to share right after. And even still now, my mind is still trying to process. It was only 4 weeks ago that my dad was still here. 2 months ago that we were celebrating his birthday. My mind is still trying to process that even though my dad's soul has moved on, I'm never going to see his physical body. That for me has been one of the harder things. Even bringing it up now starts to bring up the emotions for me. What's been helping me cope in those moments is saying, okay, just because his physical body is not here, I can still connect with him. But also my mind goes, you know what? When one person leaves, there makes room for another person. So I have more energetically, I have more space to give to other people in my life. And I look forward to developing and furthering those connections. I feel called to share that because people listening to this podcast are grieving or going through something. Being able to hear someone else has brought me comfort during this time.
That idea that it leaves space now for more things to come in, because life is about change. We can't stop that. Humans go through cycles, the seasons go through cycles, like everything goes through cycles. If everything stayed the same, there would be no space for anything to be created, anything new to be birthed. It's difficult when you're in it to say like, okay, I understand that, but it still sucks. It still sucks. It still hurts, but that's okay too. Honoring those feelings and allowing yourself to say, yes, this is really painful right now, even though I know it's just part of life. It still hurts. And that's okay. We need to honor those emotions and those feelings. But I do love that idea that we need to have endings in order for new beginnings to happen. And that happens within us and with outside of us as well. Like it's all just part of the cycles.
Yeah, I love that. And it's like in those moments, it all goes back to fulfilling your needs. So maybe thinking about my dad not physically being here is triggering an emotion for me. It's just something that's in myself that needs a little love and attention. So when that comes up for me, I ask myself, well, what is this showing me? What do I need? And most of the time, at least right now, it's that deeper connection, that bond that you feel with your dad, that father-daughter connection. It's this beautiful, special connection. So I just ask myself, okay, well, where can I provide that for myself? Or who can I ask to give me that, to receive it? In those times, it's really just recognizing that it's part of yourself that needs some extra love and has some needs coming up.
Thank you so much. Is there anything else you want to leave us with before we wrap up this really brief session? I appreciate it.
Thank you for this beautiful podcast, and thank you for listening. If you're listening to this, then you really are experiencing a lot. It's so important to know that. Just be easy on yourself. It's easier said than done. But if you've been listening to this whole podcast and you resonate with my energy, be easy. Let that space that's now been opened up and to fill it with love and compassion for yourself.
Exactly. Fill yourself with the love and the compassion and be gentle, because we are often very hard on ourselves, especially when we're feeling emotional and vulnerable. Definitely take the space that you need and process it. Thank you so much, Mary. It was so nice to talk to you again.
Thank you, Jill. I appreciate it. And thank you, everybody, for listening. If you had a breakthrough or realization, I definitely would love to hear. If you want to drop me a message on Instagram.
Yeah, I will have all of the Instagram links and all that stuff in the show notes so people can find you.
Thanks, Jill.